Wolverine humbling Daredevil is one of the coolest things that I've seen in Marvel Comics. So, this takes place in Daredevil issue number 7, but we're going to cover this whole story arc because it's really good. But what ends up happening is Daredevil meets Wolverine in the bar with no name in Hell's Kitchen. And again, we'll explain how all this goes down. But as you guys will notice, this is not normal Wolverine. His eyes are red. There's something going on here, and it's really dope. So what's going on here is Daredevil's hunting through Hell's Kitchen for a group called the Heat, which is more or less a kind of paramilitary comprised of guys who range from just low-level thugs to former members of the US military that are just looking for a reason to be able to attack people, essentially. But this kind of journey leads him to the bar. And what he tells Wolverine, not knowing what's going on here initially, is whatever it is that you have going on, as long as you don't kill anybody, your business is my own. But then Wolverine's just kind of like, I'm here for you. And Daredevil picks up on the fact immediately that Wolverine is possessed right now. The possession here is dope, and it all ties into like Doctor Strange, or at least involves his character and that kind of stuff. It's pretty amazing. But he says, of course he's been possessed. I sense it almost immediately this time. Maybe I'm more aware after the vision that Doctor Strange conjured. When I consider my mortal sins, I know which one I'm most guilty of. None of my other flaws comes close to my wrath, and I don't know if wrath could find a more perfect earthly vessel than Wolverine. And Wolverine just lunges at this guy. Now, the funny thing here, and this is one of the things that's sort of cool, if you're only familiar with Wolverine from like Hugh Jackman's depiction of the character, you don't really know how capable of a fighter he is. Wolverine is ridiculously good at fighting. And so all Daredevil can really do here is bob and weave. And that's why he says, it's no use. The devil wrath is in control. Wolverine won't listen, not unless I make him listen. And so Daredevil ultimately goes hand to hand with this guy. And it's a knockdown, drag out fight, right? It's amazing. But the whole time in this, Daredevil gives us this monologue where he says, I fought Wolverine before. Each time I've been lucky to walk away. The man doesn't hurt the way normal people do. It's like fighting a slab of meat wrapped around a lead pipe. And the diabolical wrath that's possessing him has made him even nastier than usual. I'm in trouble, tired, losing focus. Wolverine, on the other hand, is fired up. It takes everything I've got not to get sliced to ribbons. I've got to get him somewhere less crowded before anyone else gets hurt. I feint and dodge and taunt, hurting the wrath-possessed Wolverine toward the pier. But it's cool, right? Because Wolverine is almost kind of in a berserker state. He's not a full berserker rage. Those of you guys who don't know what I'm talking about, when Wolverine goes into a berserker rage, it's amazing. Like all semblance of self-control goes out the window, and he literally just devolves into an animalistic state. But ultimately, the fight does make its way to the pier, and these guys are just totally tussled. And what's cool is that Daredevil gives us this amazing realization where he says, my gut lurches as I realize the truth. I can't win. He's too strong, too tough, too vicious, and he's healing while I'm not. I always knew my wrath would be my undoing. And Wrath, in possession of Wolverine, taunts Daredevil here, right? He's like, I know what you're thinking, I can smell it, but you got it all wrong, darling. It ain't your wrath that's got a hold of me, it's your lust. That's cool, because what it does is it reflects the idea that Daredevil kind of has a lust for violence. And those of you guys who are familiar with Catholicism probably picked up incredibly fast, these are 7 deadly sins, right? And that's what's going on with the Saladin Ahmed run of Daredevil. It's one of the things that makes it so cool. And once this statement's made, Daredevil realizes the significance of this, right? He says, lust, of course, some part of me, a big part of me, lusts for violence. I want to deny it, but even devils sometimes speak the truth. I don't know how to defeat this shameful desire, this relentless drive to fight until my knuckles bleed. I only know it starts by being honest with myself that this life of fists and broken bones is ugly, and admitting that I cannot change it on my own. But if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us them and to cleanse us from our unrighteousness. And so this is cool because what ends up happening is that Daredevil grabs Wolverine and jumps into the water. Because anybody who's experienced with Wolverine as a character knows water's like his one major weakness, right? You can drown Wolverine. It's one of the only ways to actually kill him. It's kind of part of the Xavier protocols, right? I mean, you remove his head from his body and that'll basically keep him dead because he won't be able to regrow his head. head. The alternative, throw him in water, let him sink and drown, right? If he's unconscious, and just leave him there. As long as nobody digs him up, he's gonna be fine. The other thing that goes on is Matt actually consecrates the water. He says, "And if a man cleanses himself, he shall be a vessel unto honor, sanctified, fit for the master's use, and prepared unto every good work. Then will I sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean from all your filthiness and from all your idols." And that's what gets the demon out of his body. And then Daredevil, of course, fires his baton, brings the two of them out of the water, and then they just kind of talk for a little bit. They share a beer in a bar, which I think is one of the coolest things, because Wolverine's just kind of like, I mean, I'll be honest, man, right? Like, this isn't the first time I've ever been possessed. And he says, "But take it from me," right? I'm going to give you a little bit of advice. It's better to make your peace with what you are than to spend a lifetime denying it. Take it from someone who knows firsthand. And ultimately, he just leaves. So the bigger question that's taking place is, what's going on here? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to jump back to issue number 6 and then kind of wrap back around and go forward from issue number 8 to the rest of the story arc. And issue number 6, of course, builds off the first 5 issues, which basically solidified the idea that like demons were showing up in Hell's Kitchen that were based on the 7 deadly sins, and they were possessing people. So for example, he fought a possessed version of She-Hulk, different things along those lines, but he didn't fully understand what was going on. One part of this is because on some level, Matt Murdock is slightly amnesic, but the other part of it is because he doesn't recall the journey that he took to hell. And so what happens is he visits with Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange kind of gives him a bit of a guide here, but he doesn't really solve the problem. And I think it's pretty ingenious the way that it's done, because Steven's just kind of like, I mean, I know what's going on, and I could solve this problem for you and tell you what's going on, but the reality here is that it's your journey. And that's one of the things that's hit here, right? When Matt is talking to Doctor Strange and asks him how She-Hulk is, he says, well, she's doing well, right? Recovered almost instantly once you exorcise that devil from her. And where Matt says, thank God, the response to Steven is, well, God and the fact that the woman has the constitution of a bull. But as I told you, there is a bigger picture we need to discuss. I know many things. I'm here to remind you of what you know. And where Matt doesn't really understand what that means, because again, slight amnesia going on here, the response to Steven is, it means you know exactly what trail these diabolical entities followed to get to Hell's Kitchen. And you need a little push in admitting it. Consider me that push. And so he kind of just like presents a door to him. But with Matt realizing what's going on and the fact that there are like demons coming after him, he kind of asks like Doctor Strange, like, couldn't you just quash them with magic or something like that? And the response to Steven is like, they're your devils, right? Asking me to destroy them is like asking me to decide your favorite color or asking me to love your father for you. It just doesn't work that way. You're the one with the key. All I can do is show you the door. It's pretty dope, right? So one of the things to know is in recent years in Marvel, Matt Murdock had actually traveled to hell and then ultimately returned. When he did, he was slightly amnesic as a result of that, but that was kind of the gateway that these demons used to follow him here. Now, one of the other things that's sort of intriguing is that Saladin Ahmed is actually toying with the idea of the devil in Marvel Comics, which doesn't really exist. The closest you get to that is the one below all, which is what happens when the one above all hulks out. Yes, that happened. It was during Al Ewing's run of the Incredible Hulk, I think. We have a video on it. Alex, you will link that down in the description of this video. But it's one of those cool things that goes on here, right? Like, it's a cool little moment. And so what he does is when he goes through this door and kind of goes into his own experiences, he doesn't fully understand what's happening, right? Is this place a vision? Is it an illusion? Is it a pocket dimension? This is what he was referencing a minute ago and during his fight with Wolverine. But what he ends up doing is coming across quite literally the devil. And the devil's very cloak and dagger here, right? Very ambiguous, not really offering a whole lot in the way of exposition. More so than that, it's actually speaking with Matt Murdock's voice himself. And a lot of what it does is it taunts him, right? God abandoned you long ago, different things like that. And that's one of the things about the Daredevil mythos, if you sort of look at it from the perspective of how all this stuff works in relation to Marvel Comics. God is ceremonial more than anything else. When Matt Murdock talks about God, he's actually talking about the one above all. He just doesn't know it, right? like God as he's depicted in Catholicism is what Matt Murdock is talking about. But the fact is that once Matt Murdock kind of come to terms with the reality of what it is that he's done, in the sense that he has engaged in a series of actions that have basically brought out his darker half, and that he's the reason why these demons have escaped, he just kind of screams out, right, that God is light. His faith, to a degree, sort of saves him, and then he re-emerges, and that's why he's dressed in white, because he's almost this kind of angelic guy. And so what follows is his immediate intention in going after the Heat, and that's what ties into the rest of the story arc, that the Heat itself, as this kind of paramilitary group, is not there arbitrarily. They're actually there for a reason, and they were put there by somebody. And so what Matt does is he basically attacks one of these guys and is like, I'm tired of playing this game. Who's running the show? Who gave you the orders here? And this guy's not really spilling the beans. I mean, he kind of does, but he just doesn't really know enough. He's like, we don't know who the top guys are, but I can give you my lieutenant, right? The guy who basically gave us our direct orders, right about now, he'll be at the bar. That's what led Matt Murdock to the bar with no name, and that's what led him to his encounter with Wolverine. And so what this does, switching over to issue number 8, is that it picks up with Elektra and Daredevil. Now, as you guys notice, Elektra's dressed up as Daredevil. That comes out of the Chip Zdarsky run, the one that just took place before this, where Matt Murdock was thrown in prison, and so Elektra became the new Daredevil in his stead. The fact is, like, these guys working together, they start going after the Heat, and the intention here is to, like, work their way up the ranks, right? Figure out who it is that's running all of this. What's really cool here is that as they're fighting these guys in the park, that what you have is Daredevil overhearing something, right? He says, the knife misses Elektra but grazes me. I ignore the pain though and focus on another small sound, a heartbeat, its rhythm as relentless as death, because the knife that got thrown at them came from Bullseye. Now, here's the thing about Lester, right? So when it comes to Bullseye in Marvel Comics, people sleep on his character, man. They don't realize how capable Bullseye is. There was a story called Shadowland where Daredevil had actually been possessed by the beast of an organization called the Hand. The cool thing here is that in that story, I want to say that Bullseye faced off against like 100 members of the Hand by himself. And to give you guys a frame of reference here, even Wolverine gives the Hand a wide berth. That guy won't go messing with them, because when the Hand comes after you, it's not like a ninja that attacks you because they're super capable. No, it's like 500 of them will descend on you at once. It's crazy. And that's why even facing off against both Elektra and Matt at the same time, there's not really anything they can do, right? I mean, they can just bob and weave, but ultimately they kind of start to wear him down, right? I mean, with this guy's agility and his just martial arts capabilities, that they start to realize because he's getting exhausted, all they have to do is just kind of let things go a little bit longer. Now, of course, this is also Bullseye talking some mad trash, right? It's pretty amazing, but they end up tackling him. And the funny thing is that it was all designed to be a kind of distraction, right? Biding time, because he's just like, okay, like that's enough. This is getting boring. I officially surrender. And where Matt's just like, what? Like, what's going on? The response of Bullseye here is like, you always say you know when people are lying. Well, I surrender. I'm not going to fight you anymore tonight. And Matt's like, he's telling the truth. But the fact is that like cops show up on the scene, but they're not here to arrest Bullseye. The cops are essentially on his side. What's crazy about this is Bullseye's like, I have a message for you, right? This is what you were supposed to know. He says, West Theater tomorrow night at midnight. Now get out of my way, my ride's here. And he takes off with the cops. Now at that point, you switch over to Daredevil and Elektra at this theater. And it's just this massive amphitheater with all those people there. Bullseye comes out, right? And he was like, so you guys are all armed to the teeth, but look at you guys, right? He's like, look at these numbers. You know I'm a solo operator type. You tell me who you want dead, I throw something at them, they die. You pay me. And that's the cool thing about Bullseye, because he's not wrong, man. A stick, handguns, knives, it doesn't matter. He'll kill you with anything. But he's like, the man I'm about to introduce said something that made me think. He said, when you throw a knife, a single man dies. But what if you could throw an army at your enemies? That's why he called this muster. So all of you could see what the Heat has become. Not a gang, an army. Now, as an entrepreneur, I've never been too big on bosses. Most of them can't do anything for themselves. Most of them don't know anything about getting their hands dirty. But I know one man who's not like that. He might wear nice suits and talk fancy. You might see him looking all important on the TV. He knows how to run this city like nobody else. But down deep, he was made to spill blood and get paid. A man after my own heart. If I'm the Bullseye, he's that 60-point bed right above the dartboard. The one most people can't hit. But I've done enough yammering, time for you to hear from the general himself. And so this voice kind of comes out of nowhere and it says, "Welcome, my friends. Welcome to the beginning of a new era of wealth and power. Though I've played many roles in this life, businessman, politician, diplomat, none has brought me the same simple satisfaction as being the firm and loving protector of these few blocks that we call Hell's Kitchen. And though I've worn many names, the chairman, Mr. Mayor, White King, the one that has always suited me above all others is Kingpin." And it's so cool to see because Wilson Fisk is finally returning down to the street level character that we've all known and loved. Now, when this whole announcement's made by Kingpin, like Daredevil and Elektra just like attack everybody. They attack all these members of the Heat. And it's actually kind of funny the way this goes down because while they're out there doing this, right, Bullseye, ever the showman, is like, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your friend and mine, Daredevil, to the stage." And so like Daredevil's kind of looking over all this, right? He says, "If I sometimes seem cocky in a brawl, it's for one reason. Most people I fight are not fast enough to hit me, but Lester's always been in a league of his own. The microphone was weighted to be a weapon. If I dodged the wrong way, it would have destroyed my solar plexus. As it is, I'm barely able to get back on my feet." So it's kind of nuts because at that point, it's like round 2, or at least it seems like it's going to be that way when Lester prepares to fight Elektra again. But of course, Daredevil basically incapacitates Lester by just stomping on his head. Right? And so that's kind of the crazy thing is because once Lester stands back up, Daredevil's like, "Where's Wilson Fisk?" And the response of Lester is, "Those are the kinds of questions you ask when the fight's over, genius. We've just been getting warmed up. Now my friends want to play. Heard you fought 100 dudes at once. That's really impressive, but we got about 1,000 of us here." And so Elektra picks up the microphone and addresses everybody in the crowd and is like, "Then I suppose 1,000 lowlives will be howling in agony tonight, unable to sleep from the pain, because any person who sets foot on this stage will have both their femurs broken in the most excruciating manner possible. So, which of you will be first?" And like nobody moves. She's like, "What are you guys waiting for?" Right? And they're kind of talking amongst themselves, right? Like, well, I mean, what are we waiting for? Right? And one of them's like, "I heard she killed 16 guys once, right? Put my buddy in a hospital." And like, no one is making any moves. And Bullseye's just kind of like, "Are you chumps actually scared of them?" Right? Like, didn't you guys hear my inspirational speech about being an army? You boys hear those sirens? Space is rented and paid for. We weren't doing anything but exercising our right to peacefully assemble until these two lunatics showed up. So maybe you can find your backbones now that the cavalry's here." But then of course he just gets the haymaker put on him by Daredevil, right? Daredevil helps Bullseye understand his place in the bigger picture. And he's like, "Where's Fisk?" Right? Like, "I'm tired of all this nonsense. Where is this guy?" But ultimately he has to bail, right? And the reason why is because the cops are there and the cops are like, "Daredevil, come out. This is your only warning." And so ultimately he ends up taking off. And so what this does is this switches over to Daredevil and Elektra going back on the hunt again, right? Like trying to find these different members of the Heat. And of course, they take a bunch of them out, right? Once the Heat scattered and all that kind of stuff, they sort of find a few of them, they attack them, and then they end up arriving at this sort of base. And so as they're walking through, because of Daredevil's enhanced senses and whatnot, he's able to figure out that something's wrong. He actually trips a booby trap, not realizing it. It almost kills him. And then a few more members of the Heat show up, and then Elektra deals with them while Daredevil continues on. He gets to the main room, and this voice just says, "So what they say is true then. Speak of the devil, and he doth appear." And it's Kingpin. Now, the relationship between Kingpin and Daredevil is always something that is incredibly enjoyable to see in Marvel. It's one of the things that I love the most, because what had happened previously is that Bullseye had been sent after Butch, who's the son of Kingpin, and the idea was that Bullseye was going to assassinate him. Daredevil didn't understand why, and he's like, I've got questions for you. What's your game here? Street gangs, turf wars, rundown safe houses? Isn't this all small time? And Kingpin's response is, once I would have thought so, but I've learned much over the past year or so, particularly about returning to one's roots. And where Daredevil kind of goads him a little bit, right? Asks, like, would that include murder? Bullseye in the heat tried to take out Butch Ferris. He'd be dead if I hadn't stepped in. You ordered a hit on your own son? The response of Kingpin, in his ruthlessness, but also some kind of twisted version of compassion, is he says, is that what you think? The reports are correct then. You've grown dense in recent months. And where Daredevil doesn't know what he's talking about, he says, I'm talking about the fact that you didn't stop anything. Bullseye performed his pseudo-assassination perfectly. He was hired to maim my son, not to kill him. Butch is very good at putting on a brave face, but deep down, the boy is soft. He has no stomach for this business. I simply gave him a reason to get out of it. He surprised me with his backbone and refused to flee the field, which is inconvenient to my current plans. I may have to actually kill him after all. But all this talk and the actions of Kingpin seem wrong. It's not something that he normally does. It just seems so strange. And so Kingpin says, you want to talk me out of my reacquaintiveness, talk me into doing what you consider the right thing. Admirable, but words will not suffice. Not tonight, not between us. And as the two of them are fighting, Kingpin is quite literally attacking Daredevil like a man possessed. Because Daredevil says, Fisk has always been staggeringly strong, but this is different. He's stronger than he should be, knows things he shouldn't know. He's being fueled by something hellish. And the reason why he draws this conclusion is that Kingpin says, you can't beat me, not while you remain this man. A man unwilling to sacrifice, a man afraid of making hard choices, rock-solid father figure and swashbuckling superhero, breaker of bones and bringer of peace, humble holy man who spends his nights with a beautiful devil. You're so graspingly certain that you can have it all. And so again, jumping back to like Daredevil's kind of inner thoughts here, he says, this isn't just Wilson Fisk, it's the devil. With every blow, I can feel a diabolical force draining my energy. He's stealing my strength, making it his. Lord help me, I'm in trouble. And so that's when you switch back to Kingpin, and he almost kind of reveals what his real intention is here, where he says, I've learned from you, Daredevil, and it's made me stronger. No more abstract ambition, no more being master of neighborhoods I'll never visit, no more international schemes. I've returned to seize the one thing on this planet that's most important to me, to make it utterly and completely irrevocably mine, not just in law, but in essence. For that is true greed. Hell's Kitchen belongs to me again existentially. Its streets, its streams of revenue, its people. Your friends, Elektra, those sniveling children, I own everything in this neighborhood, including your wretched little soul. For I have all the power of hell behind me, and you, God turned his back on you a long time ago. And he grabs Daredevil and just throws him out the window. And it's amazing, right? It's just one of the coolest things. Like I told you, it was so incredible. And so what ends up happening is Elektra finally catches up to Matt, right? Basically after fighting off members of the Heat, she finds him just like laying on the ground, basically around trash in shambles. She ends up bringing him back and basically feeding him a kind of potion, more or less, that basically helps him, right? Kind of restores him. And so the two of them kind of talk about what's going on. And Elektra chimes in and she says, if I felt it, I know you did. Fisk is different, more powerful. Are you ready to face him? And that's where Matt just kind of looks at it and says, he's not just different, he's possessed. Same as you were, coming back to snatch up his old turf, hoarding stolen goods. Greed. A devil that followed me out of hell has a hold on Wilson Fisk, which means I have to face him. And the response of Elektra, then let us not waste any more time. Now, the cool thing about this, right? The coolest thing about all of process, especially this moment with Wilson Fisk, it's as much metatextual as it is literal. Wilson Fisk and his vendetta against Daredevil goes back pretty far, which, by the way, I may have referred to Daredevil as Deadpool. I don't know. Sometimes I make that mistake. The point is, it goes back pretty far. And so what ends up happening is that once they get into the safe house, they discover what's basically a satellite map of the neighborhood, right? One, as we're told, it's one of those absurdly priced new apartment buildings, and it's circled in red. And so this leads to Daredevil and Elektra finally catching up to Kingpin again, where he's literally crushing all these guys, seemingly killing them all. And he's in the process of going after Butch, right? Trying to kill his son. Now, of course, Daredevil and Elektra step in. And again, Kingpin's plot here is he says, to kill a man is to take ownership of him. And so I will make my son mine again, and with him, all of Hell's Kitchen. Call it greed, but don't pretend you don't know it, Father Matt. Now, he only knows that identity because he's possessed by a demon. But the fact is, this is one of those small moments that Marvel uses to explain why Kingpin now knows the identity of Matt. Now, Elektra's kind of flabbergasted by this. She's like, how in the world? But none of it matters, right? Kingpin says, you who dare to ask so very much of God, the life of a hero, the life of a priest, the life of a lover, where Elektra's like, Matthew, what's going on? The response of Kingpin is, your greed, your refusal to choose between one thing and another is why you will die at my hands. It's why you'll be helpless to stop me as I crush the life from this murderous woman who has caused me so much trouble. And so again, it's just kind of this back and forth, back and forth. And so Daredevil, kind of musing to himself, right, realizes that going against Kingpin is not an easy feat because it's all the power that he has, right, all the strength and everything combined with demonic possession. And so what he ends up doing and seeing what's really going on here is the full totality of the threat that Kingpin represents with this demonic possession as an almost insurmountable and indestructible figure. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. We'll find out in the next video how this ends. I'm leaving you guys on a massive cliffhanger. I know you guys are gonna hate me, but the next story arc's not done, so we gotta wait for it to finish. But thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.